Now, in our top story today, President Donald Trump has had a telephonic meeting with President Jacob Zuma this afternoon as part of the Africa Day celebrations. They spoke whilst President Zuma was at Luthuli House for his regular Monday meetings there. For more on the significance of this teleconference, we're now joined by SABC's foreign editor, Sophie Mokoena. Sophie, thanks very much for joining us. So there was a little bit of a buzz during the course of the day once the news broke that this conversation was going to happen. Strangely, I spoke to him on Friday and I asked him whether he had spoken to him as yet, and he hadn't, but he was expecting it, I think. So what do we know about what the conversation brought out?
Well, in terms of the statement from the presidency, President Zuma congratulated Donald Trump. You would recall that he was elected the U.S. president in November. I think this was the first time they spoke, and therefore he extended the message, and also making a commitment that South Africa is still committed to have good relations with the U.S. And of course, apparently Donald Trump said the same thing, that the U.S. is still committed to enhancing and strengthening the relations between the two countries. And later on, of course, during the discussion, as was expected, the issue of peace on the continent was discussed, and you are aware that South Africa is playing a prominent role to ensure that there's peace and stability on the continent, starting with the former president, the late former President Nelson Mandela, who was involved in the DRC talk. The former President Thabo Mbeki has been involved, and who's still involved with the Sudan question. You know, President Zuma was involved with Burundi, and South Africa continues to be involved in bringing peace on the continent, and this is the issue that they also touched on.
And no surprise that it's President Zuma and President Buhari as well that he spoke to today.
Yes, of course, the two countries are quite important on the continent. You are aware that these are two big countries, and in terms of trade, when you really want to do business on the continent, you look to these two countries, and South Africa in particular being a gateway. And you know very well Nigeria, the same with its population. You cannot ignore that market. And also already during Barack Obama's tenure, he was involved in assisting the Americans to deal with the problem of Boko Haram. You are aware that there's a coalition force of the region that is Chad, Cameroon and Nigeria trying to address the problem of Boko Haram, and America was spending a lot of money to assist Nigeria to deal with that question. And when we look at a statement from Abuja, the president is currently in London. You are aware that he's not well. He's still there getting treatment. They spoke on the telephone. They touched on the Boko Haram issue, and also President Trump making a commitment that they'll continue to support Nigeria as it battles the terror problem. So
there'll be some difficult conversation that the presidents are going to have in the future, and I think about the Middle East as one, South Africa's position with Palestine and the Palestinians. And then the other, this travel ban involves 3 African countries. Yes,
indeed. We look at what they also touch on. It's an issue of multilateral organizations, the United Nations, the IMF, the World Bank, the G20, and we look at those multilateral organizations. These are the issues that may be of concern to member countries. For an example, the United Nations is not happy about the decision to ban certain countries, or this travel ban, you know, that is affecting mostly the Muslim countries, and of course we do have African countries who are affected, and you cannot sit back and relax as South Africa because you are not affected. Who knows, tomorrow it might be South Africa. And I think in due course, when they really find time to talk about the global matters, these issues will come and on the spotlight and on the agenda. And I think they might have meet one another at the G20 meeting this year, the United Nations General Assembly in September. Clearly they will meet there, and these are the issues that South Africa will really make its intentions clear in terms of where they stand. You know, South Africa supports the peace process in the Middle East, and it looks like Donald Trump has taken a side there. I don't think that will sit well with South Africa. The question of Iran, South Africa has got a position, and America seems to be having a different position. position. But what's striking for me, Peter, is that you'd recall that when Donald Trump had a meeting, handing over meeting with former President Barack Obama, when he was asked after, he said that, you know, he get a sense that, yes, Donald Trump will continue to be Donald Trump, but when the reality sets in, he will definitely reconsider certain decisions. And I'm not surprised that today he took a decision to call the two leaders on the continent, because I remember very well when I spoke to Donald Trump's political advisor, the campaign manager, Mrs. Conway, in New York, outside Donald Trump's building after he had won. She was very firm to say that, I mean, why are you asking me about South Africa and Africa in particular? What did Barack Obama do for the continent? It was like, we are, by the way, as we have said previously, that it looks like he is inward looking, but it looks like he is now
softening on this.
Yes, it's a
We've run out of
different
time,
version.
but very briefly, he's been on office a very short period of time. He hasn't spoken to many international leaders. It seems then that the Africa agenda has been pushed up the list quite a bit.
Exactly. This speaks to many leaders around the world have accepted that you cannot ignore the continent anymore. It's not a dark continent anymore. If you really want to make business, this is where you can grow and you can make business. And we know very well that we are a developing country ourselves, and there's a lot that can be done in this country. And therefore, if you really want a good trading partner, you can't look anywhere except south, which is South Africa, but also the continent in general. I mean, we are a force to be reckoned with.
Okay, Sophie, we're going to have to leave it there. That's our foreign editor, Sophie Mokoena, speaking to us about that conversation that took place a little bit earlier on this evening between President Zuma and President Trump.